Which best picture is the best picture? It's a question akin to what came first, the chicken or the egg? Many of us don't know. So join along with me, jump on board, come on, let's go. As I spend hours here reviewing every single best picture start to finish and reviewing and ranking them. Today, we go back to where it all began with the OG, the first winner, 1928, Wings. Directed by William Wellman, starring Clara Bow, Charles Rogers and Richard Arlen. Described as an epic of the air, it follows the journey of two young men becoming war pilots who are from the same town but are complete opposites by virtue of how they live. Jack, the cheeky flirtatious car mechanic played by Charles Rogers, is in love with a lady named Sylvia. And David, the loyal family first, wealthy man played by Richard Arlen, is also in love with Sylvia, and thus the rivalry begins, which follows them as they go to war. At the same time, Mary, played by Clara Bow, is the sweet, genuine neighbour, and she's in love with Jack from a distance. She lets her heart take over and enrolls in the war in hope that finding Jack will bring them together and they'll fall for each other. So you put all those plots together and we've got ourselves a movie. Before we jump into the content, let's take a little revisionist history trip down memory lane to 1928. The first TV is sold, Herbert Hoover wins the election over Alfred E. Smith, taking over from Coolidge. The Yankees are the world champs, pro basketball and pro football aren't really a thing yet, and Fleming discovers penicillin. So a much different time in life, and what was interesting was it really reflected on the art and how everything came together. And also, I'm just going to quickly explain how I'll be scoring every single movie as I go down this journey, and I'll do a reminder every episode as we go through it. So I've broken it down into 5 categories. I'll give a score for the score, or the audio, we'll say, a score for the cinematography, a score for the acting, a score for the plot, and then just a general did I like it. Each bracket will be rated out of 20, which will give me a total of 100. And from there, that'll give me enough variance to rank and properly rate everything as I go along this journey. So it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out on top. And now, let's get into the content. So Wings is the best picture I hadn't seen before, which is awesome, because part of the reason I wanted to do this is to make sure I actually got to watch all of them and really get a good scope of cinema, really. One thing I will say about Wings and a lot of films, we'll probably call it pre-1940s, is that a lot of them are in the process of invention and creation. So a lot of the shots and a lot of the audio and things like that, you can't be too mega critical as they're really on the forefront of, what we know as film today. So in that sense, I had to try and really keep that front of mind and be a little bit less critical, but also at the same time, try and be balanced with my views and thoughts on the film. With that being said though, I was actually really pleased with what I saw. Obviously it's a best picture, so it's not going to just be trash content, but it was still nice to see everything put together well. I felt that the score was pretty good and it changed modes and moods when needed. I thought that was really important as well. Given that it is a silent film, if you get your music or your score wrong here, it's really going to set the wrong mood or give you the wrong understanding of what's happening. So it was really pleasing to see that all came together. There's some really nice shots. There's an incredible tracking shot through one of the dinner scenes, which honestly felt like kind of a big moment. I feel like that's something that's been repeated going forward. So shouts to Wellman for hitting that shot. I don't know if he's the first person to do it, but it landed and it really hit when it was on screen. Speaking of the tracking shot and its place in the film, that was during the Paris segment, and what I'll say about the Paris segment of the film is that it did feel just that tad too long and probably a little bit drawn out. The rest of the film were getting a really solid pacing and it felt a lot quicker and things were happening with real purpose. But I would say that the Paris part of this film really did feel like almost like a break. It was like they were almost taking a quick smoko and coming back. So with that in mind, it could have been done with the same effect, probably in a little bit of a shorter space, and that probably would have added to the suspense and the thrill and the enjoyment of the film. Last thing I'll say on the Paris segment is I just wish there was more of a climax or a peak for Mary's character. We get a lot of build up for her during the film and definitely some investment into her character and her mindset. So I would have loved to have seen that. It felt like a missed opportunity for me that we didn't get a little bit more. That could have just been from my observation though. One thing I'm going to be doing every single film is a villain check. So in this, Kellerman is the villain. He's part of the enemy forces. He makes a really weird decision around not shooting at a certain point in time, and that's all I'll say about that. But in terms of villain craft, I'm giving him a weak 1 out of 10 because he wasn't menacing. He didn't do anything to add to the story really, other than bring some really cool music in the score. So yeah, weak villain performance, but actually overall it didn't affect the film too much. And what I will say is it's paced out really well in the sense of Act 3 is lovely, and I think that it's probably the strongest part of the film. I did want to give a sneaky shout out to David's dog, who gives a low-key great performance, pulling on the heartstrings like all pets should do, well before his time, before the palm dog was even prominent. So shout out to David's dog. So based on my ratings categories, as you can see on screen, I'm giving this one a 49 out of 100, and you can see individually how I've broken down all of those scores. I'd love for you to leave your thoughts in the comments below as well, and also if you've made it this far, I'd love for you to let me know too, and I really appreciate if you're coming along for the journey, as this is going to be a fun one. Thanks crew, I'm not a critic, just someone with a lot of spare time.